We begin our chapter on Etruscan and Roman art and lecture guide number 6 with Etruria. Etruria. What does this name mean? It's a representation of a series of kingdoms on the peninsula that we now call Italy, and specifically the region outlined as Tuscany, which is the central western coast and where we find the cities of Florence and Siena, Florence being a great repository of art history and one of the three, along with Rome and Venice, most popular Italian touristic as well as historical cities. What's important about this period, the Etruscan, is that it melds Greek and Egyptian influences into something new. One of the most important developments of this time is that the Etruscans developed the rounded arch as an essential structural unit. It may possibly have come from an earlier time, the Egyptians, but the Etruscans made it into something more versatile than earlier architectural supports like the post and lintel. And they refined what the Egyptians began, if indeed the rounded arch started there. The rounded arch was also something that is used, as we'll see, very, no pun intended, constructively in the kind of propaganda of actual benefits to a society that the Romans sold their constituency and new populaces as they conquered parts of Italy and then went on to the Middle East, Northern Africa. The rounded arch was used in aqueducts. It was used in some of their most essential, in terms of iconic representations of the Roman Empire, structures such as the Colosseum. So if it was invented in Egypt, we think it is. It was adopted by, improved upon by Etruria, and then later perfected by Rome in terms of its structural genius and soundness as an operational architectural structure, but also in terms of, again, quote unquote, selling the benefits of belonging to the Roman Empire as it conquered other civilizations. The idea of sacred architecture is something that comes from Greece, and in Etruscan art we see the adoption of many of the same gods and religions and temple architecture. These Etruscan temples had porches, essentially, stairs on one end, and sculptures along the roofline rather than embedded inside the pediment. And what is the pediment? It's this triangular upper part of the front of this classical style structure with a roof and columns beneath it. And here's some of the diagrams that outline the typical Etruscan temple plan. You get an idea of its size. And here, an overwhelming display, compilation of some of the many different kinds of columns supporting architectural structures. The most important of which, as we briefly touched on, are the Doric, the Ionic, and the Corinthian, which, as we see again, vary not just slightly in terms of their actual height, but in terms of composition of the columns and the size of what we could even think of as registers, having studied horizontal bands in sculptural elements in the Egyptian time, and most importantly, of course, identifiable by the tops of these columns and the kinds of decorative elements that were added to them.